looking to connect a region of over 600 new bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam. Hello, Eliana.
Hello, I'm Eliana Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a military operation in Ukraine with explosions heard soon after in the capital and other parts of the country, prompting outrage from President Joe Biden, who warned of a catastrophic loss of life, and will give an update on the Filipinos there.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday said the world will hold Russia accountable over its attack against Ukraine that he warned will cause catastrophic loss of life.
And the Philippines now is better off prepared to exit the COVID-19 pandemic, that according to vaccine expert panel member Dr. Ron Jean Solante.
We are on that process now, no?
First in our news, Russian President Vladimir Putin today announced a military operation in Ukraine with explosions heard soon after in the capital and other parts of the country. And that prompted outrage from U.S. President Joe Biden, who warned of a catastrophic loss of life. Weeks of intense diplomacy and the imposition of Western sanctions failed to deter Putin, who had massed between 150,000 and 200,000 troops along the borders of Ukraine. He said, "I have made the decision of a military operation," he said in a surprise television announcement shortly before 6 a.m. local time in Moscow. He also called on Ukrainian soldiers to lay down their arms, claiming he wanted a demilitarization of the former Soviet state, but not its occupation. Putin then addressed those who would try to interfere with us. They must know that the response of Russia will be immediate and will lead to consequences that you have never known before, unquote. The Russian leader did not specify the scope of the military operation or whether it would be limited to eastern Ukraine. Now, the Philippine government's free repatriation flight offer for Filipinos in Ukraine is still on the table, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs on Wednesday, amid the escalating tensions in the region. To date, there are more than 300 Filipinos living in Ukraine. Our chief and singular concern is to take care or take out of harm's way our fellow Filipinos in Ukraine and bringing them to the nearest places of safety by the fastest possible way, according to Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. in a statement. He also said our offer to take Filipinos in Kiev is underway, and USEC Sara Ariola is spearheading the repatriation effort for Filipinos who want to come home. He added, Ariola is the Undersecretary for the Migrant Workers Affairs Office at the DFA. As of February 18, the DFA has repatriated only six Filipinos from the European Union. Last week, the Philippine Embassy in Warsaw, which exercises jurisdiction over Ukraine, also deployed a consular team to Kiev to enable faster coordination with the Filipino community and relevant authorities. The DFA statement comes as tensions mount in the region following the announcement of President Putin that Russia would officially recognize certain areas of Ukraine's eastern Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. Meanwhile, Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles said the government is hoping still for a peaceful resolution of the crisis. However, he said President Duterte has already prepared for, quote, any eventualities in Ukraine. Take a look.
Unang-una sa lahat, syempre we hope that all parties will explore all avenues. Sana po ay makapaghanap po tayo lahat, no, dito sa buong mundo, makapaghanap po ng mabuting avenues para matagumpay nating marating ang kapayapaan. The President and your government is preparing for any and all eventualities and any and all contingencies are being prepared. Kasama at kabilang sa kinakausap ni Pangulo yung mga kagawaran na directly involved at that will be directly involved for any and all eventualities and contingencies. No? Kabilang na dyan ang Department of Transportation, kabilang na rin po dyan yung Department of Energy. And of course, our Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster.
Now, U.S. President Joe Biden said the world will hold Russia accountable over its attack against Ukraine that he warned will cause catastrophic loss of life. In a statement issued shortly after Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the start of military operations in Ukraine, President Biden said he would address the U.S. public to outline the consequences for Russia, calling the attack unprovoked and unjustified. The U.S. president was due to join a virtual closed-doors meeting of G7 leaders Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the U.S. at 9 a.m. local time or U.S. time in Thursday U.S. time. The White House said his remarks to the public would come in early afternoon in Washington. On Tuesday, the U.S. government joined European allies in imposing sanctions on 2 Russian banks, Moscow's sovereign debt, several oligarchs, and other measures. On Wednesday, President Biden announced he was imposing sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline from Russia to Germany, one of energy-rich Moscow's highest-profile energy and geopolitical projects. Germany had earlier announced it would block the project from proceeding. Biden said, quote, Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction of this attack will bring, and the U.S. and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. Meanwhile, members of the UN Security Council pleaded with Russia to step back from the brink of war over Ukraine, even as Vladimir Putin announced he had decided on military action. The appeals were led by Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who made a direct, impassioned appeal to the Russian president at the start of the second Emergency Security Council session in 3 days. Let's listen in.
We meet in the face of the most serious global peace and security crisis in recent years, and certainly in my time as Secretary General. Our world is facing a moment of peril. I truly hoped it would not come. In the recent past, there were several situations with similar indications, similar rumors. And I never believed in them, convinced that nothing serious would happen. I was wrong. And I would like not to be wrong again today. So, if indeed an operation is being prepared, I have only one thing to say from the bottom of my heart. President Putin, stop your troops from attacking the Ukraine. Give peace a chance. Too many people have already died. Thank you, Mr. President. This conflict must stop now. What is clear for me is that this war doesn't make any sense. It violates the principles of the Charter, and it causes, or will cause, if it doesn't stop, a level of suffering Europe has not known since at least the volcanic crisis.
Although his announcement came just after the start of the Security Council session, the members who spoke stuck to their prepared speeches, which largely echoed Guterres' appeal. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, appealed to Putin to back away from the brink. President Putin has defied a barrage of international criticism over the crisis, with some Western leaders saying he was no longer rational. His announcement of military action came after the Kremlin said rebel leaders in eastern Ukraine had asked Moscow for military help against Kiev, and ahead of a last-ditch summit involving European Union leaders in Brussels, planned for Thursday, U.S. time.
Saudi oil expert Youssef Al-Shamari says he expects oil prices to keep increasing, reaching a peak of $110 per barrel this summer, as major crude producer Russia prepares to send troops into two breakaway regions of Ukraine, sparking Western nations to ready economic sanctions against Moscow.
So I would expect oil prices to reach the peak or the highest level at some point in the summer. After that, perhaps we could see some slightly reducing in prices, because as demand continues to decline towards the end of the year, going to go towards winter. But from my own judgment, I would expect to see prices perhaps hitting $110 as demand continues to rise under these conditions. The economy, I guess we're going to see more inflation. And that certainly will have a knock-on effect on the Federal Reserve policies and central bankers. So we would expect a rise in interest rates at some point in 2022. And perhaps that could somehow make a strengthening dollar, and in a way that could, let's say, reduce the speed at which Brent prices are rising. In OPEC Plus, we've heard from ministers that they are not planning to pump any more oil above the already agreed quota. So, and we're already seeing some underperformance from many OPEC countries. So that's in fact what makes me worried about the market tightness that we're likely to see in the first half of 2022. Also, something I'm also worried about is stagflation, where we see an increase in the prices without really an increase in the economy. So if we can avoid these two scenarios, I think that we can avoid any economic damage. On the other hand, high oil prices should bring some good returns for OPEC countries, because we all know that OPEC countries continue to be predominantly oil-based economies. So an increase in oil prices will lead to an increase in GDP, also more spending power, and that will also lead to more investments in economic diversification of projects, especially within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
The Overseas Workers Welfare Administration said that employers who will not accept overseas Filipino workers in Hong Kong who have been infected with COVID-19 and have since recovered will face sanctions.
Posibleng kaharapin ay yun nga, yung labor case, dahil nga kung talagang tuluyan nilang i-terminate yung ating OFW, susunod ay yung dito sa POEA. Nagdeklara na rin si Sec Bello na i-blacklist ang mga employers na gano'n na naging treatment sa ating mga manggagawa. So, dalawa yan. Sa Hong Kong side and the Philippine side, sa Hong Kong side, labor case sa Hong Kong Labor Authorities, legal termination. And then dito naman sa POEA, yung blacklisting ng mga employers na nagsasagawa ng illegal termination. Pinag-utos din ni Secretary Bello yung laganap na assistance. Unang-una, as we speak, merong food assistance, merong hygiene, basic hygiene assistant, hygiene kits na binibigay sa mga OFWs natin in isolation. Merong power bank, kasi nga kailangan nila ng power bank pa sa kanilang cellphones. And then, of course, paglabas nila, pag naka-recover na sila, nakaabang yung $200 financial assistance natin sa kanila. Mga 2 taon na, Yusek Rafi natin pinapalaganap ito. Kung naalala nyo, pinutos ng OWA board led by Sec Bello, yung $200 assistance sa mga OFW OFWs na natapuan ng COVID. 20,000 na po ang nakinabang dito ng OFWs sa $200 benefit na ito. Pag naka-recover yung mga Hong Kong OFWs natin from isolation, gagawaran po natin sila ng $200 at kung sila po yung nag-decide na mag-for good, at karamihan po sa kanila ay finish contract na rin yung mga nasa isolation kasi nga nagpa-PCR test sila for IATF rules pa uwi, kaya lang nag-positive. Bibigyan natin sila ng livelihood at kung may college level dependent sila, scholarship po para sa kanilang college level dependent.
Meanwhile, Kapdak added that they are studying the possibility of sending a medical team to the host territory to assist the infected OFWs. Hong Kong's government invoked emergency powers on Thursday to allow doctors and nurses from the Chinese mainland to work in the territory to help combat a spiraling coronavirus outbreak. The densely populated metropolis is the throes of its worst ever COVID wave, registering thousands of cases every day, overwhelming hospitals and government efforts to isolate all infected people in dedicated units. Hong Kong authorities have allowed a zero COVID strategy similar to mainland China that had kept infections mostly at bay throughout the pandemic. But they were caught flat-footed when the highly infectious Omicron variant broke through those defenses and have since increasingly called on the Chinese mainland for help. Chinese mainland medics are not currently allowed to operate in Hong Kong without passing local exams and licensing regulations. The statement said the emergency powers exempt certain persons or projects from all relevant statutory requirements so as to increase Hong Kong's epidemic control capacity for containing the fifth wave within a short period of time. The move came after Chinese President Xi Jinping last week ordered Hong Kong to take any necessary means to bring the outbreak under control, signaling Hong Kong would not be allowed to move towards living with the virus like much of the rest of the world. Allowing Chinese mainland medics to work in Hong Kong has been a source of debate for years. Even before the pandemic, supporters argued it could alleviate shortages in the city's overstretched healthcare system. Local medical practitioners in the past have objected, citing issues such as language and cultural barriers, though critics have dismissed such talk as protectionism. The Commission on Elections will establish special polling places for voters who belong to vulnerable sectors. The poll body said registered voters who are persons with disabilities, senior citizens, and heavily pregnant voters will be casting their votes at the Accessible Polling Place or APP, Emergency Accessible Polling Place or EAPP, or Satellite Emergency Accessible Polling Place or SEAPP that will be erected in the polling centers or places approved by the poll body. The APP will be located on the ground floor, preferably near the entrance of the building, and is free of any physical barriers and provided with necessary services, including assistive devices. The EAPP is a room or makeshift or temporary polling place established on the first floor or at the ground floor of a voting center or outside of it, but in close proximity thereto. On the other hand, the EAPP is temporarily established in a building used as a home or residence of PWDs and or senior citizens, including rehabilitation centers and sheltered workshops, where concerned PWDs and or senior citizens are living or outside thereof, but in close proximity thereto, whether administered by the government or a private institution. Manila former Commission on Elections Commissioner Antonio T. Co. Jr. has been named as new Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Malacanang confirmed Wednesday. Cabinet Secretary Carlo, acting presidential spokesperson, said President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed Co's appointment paper on Wednesday. We wish Associate Justice Ko's success in the Supreme Court, and we are confident that he will continue to dispense justice to every man, woman, and child with integrity. I am impartiality and fairness, Nograles said in a statement. Ko, who recently retired as commissioner of the COMELEC, will be replacing the position vacated by Rosemary Carandang, who retired in January. Ko also served as Undersecretary of the Department of Justice prior to his stint in COMELEC.
To Thailand now, a long-stalled bill criminalizing torture and political disappearances cleared its first hurdle in the Thai parliament as victims' families struggle for answers in scores of unsolved missing persons cases. The United Nations estimates there have been at least 82 cases of enforced disappearance in Thailand since 1980, but experts say the true figure could be higher. Human rights activists accuse Thai authorities of involvement, but perpetrators are rarely brought to justice. In an effort to counter that, lawmakers in the Thai House of Representatives unanimously passed draft laws on Wednesday after a decade of delays. Under the changes, perpetrators convicted of political disappearances or torture cases involving death could face between 15 and 30 years in jail. The bill still has to go to the Senate for approval, which could happen in the next parliamentary sitting in May. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
Kahit sino,
Dito ka na naman.
pwede na magkaroon ng million views.
Let's go!
Sana parang hindi ka nalang tiniray.
Kahit saan abutan, magti-TikTok yan.
Next, ang bagal.
Lahat ng steps, kakabisaduhin.
Hala, mataba na, tapos naka-light vest pa.
Wow. Ito na ang math question na ang kailangan nyo sa pag-compute Thai ears. Compute ears.
Saan mo kinuha yan?
Math kinig!
Sama ka? Hindi ako makakapunta eh.
Mahal din ang hobby to. Funniest Nakaball Videos!
Welcome back. Despite the deadly coronavirus disease battering the country, coronary heart disease remains the top cause of death in the country from January to November last year. That is according to the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA. Based on the PSA data released on February 22, 125,913, or 17.9%, of the total deaths during the said period died of ischemic heart disease, followed by cerebrovascular disease, which is 68,180, or 9.7%. The PSA said COVID-19 was the third leading cause of death after 67,494, or 9.6%, died of the severe respiratory illness caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The mortality rate rose from rank 14 with 8,390 deaths, or 1.5% in the same period in 2020. Policymakers from Asian countries, including the Philippines, were advised to undertake reforms and tap new instruments to defuse a debt crisis in the future. That is according to a report released by the Asian Development Bank. In the report titled The Sustainability of Asia's Debt, ADB experts said governments across Asia have much to be proud of in terms of public debt management. However, the report also said certain risks could potentially increase debt levels in the region, such as the COVID-19 crisis, the shrinking fiscal spaces, rising contingent liabilities, and other real and present dangers. Now, this leaves the region's policymakers with a mix of praise and homework. They deserve credit for their laser focus on growth, for creating enough confidence in their national currencies, and for developing their domestic capital markets, according to the report. But their work is far from done. The report said reforms are needed to balance fiscal accounts in the medium term and make them more stable thereafter. The ADB expert stated that the region's policymakers must become more transparent when it comes to corporate borrowings and rein in excessive lending to households. Now, despite the pandemic, over 500,000 children were engaged in hazardous work in 2020. That is according to the latest data released by the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA. The data showed the total number of working children considered engaged in child labor was estimated at 597,000 in 2020. The magnitude of working children considered engaged in child labor, however, was lower than the 640,000 child laborers in 2019. It said child labor referred to in this report were those children 5 to 17 years of age engaged in hazardous work identified in the DOLE, or the Department of Labor and Employment Administrative Order number 149, or long working hours only, according to the PSA. In terms of proportion, some 68.4% of the working children were engaged in child labor in 2020. Now, this was higher than the estimate of 61.2% in 2019. Of the estimated 597,000 working children engaged in child labor in 2020, some 435,000, or 72.8% of them, were boys, while 162,000, or 27.2%, were girls. Across age groups, the largest proportion, 73.3% of working children considered engaged in child labor in 2020 were in the ages 15 to 17 years.
The Philippines now is better off prepared to exit the COVID-19 pandemic, vaccine expert panel member Dr. Ron Jean Solantes said Wednesday.
So kumbaga, in short, mukhang ready na ang NCR for the alert level 1. Now, it doesn't also mean na pag nagluluwag tayo, mas lala tayong complacent sa mga ginagawa natin. Kung magluluwag tayo, we need to also protect ourselves. Now, it's now the important part here na kung nagluluwag tayo, panatiliin natin yung mga ginagawa natin, yung pag-follow ng health protocol. So, in short, I have no problem if alert level 1 will be. We will now be transitioning to alert level 1, especially in the NCR. Pero tuloy pa rin ang bakunahan, tuloy pa rin ang health protocol, at tuloy pa rin ang pag-monitor sa mga kaso. Yes, I think we are on that process now. Our mindset is hopefully we can be exiting with this pandemic. We can exit with this pandemic. At paka-importante ang pagkaso, because this is an important indicator na once we had lower na yung cases natin, we can deal with the virus. We know how to deal with it. And I think isa sa mga punto natin dito is we also have available antiviral agents that are appropriate against this infection. We have oral antivirals, we have IV antivirals. Our healthcare facilities are already equipped with how to deal with severe COVID. So for me, we are better off prepared now compared to 2 years ago or 1 year ago.
The government has deliberated the country's exit plan from the COVID-19 pandemic and now crafting a strategic roadmap to the new normal. The roadmap is set to be presented to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte early this March. Solantes said the public should always be reminded of the vaccine benefits, especially with the presence of the highly transmissible Omicron COVID-19 variant in the country. The supply of weapons to Myanmar's generals by UN member states must stop, a top UN-appointed independent rights expert said on Tuesday. In a report to the Human Rights Council, the UN Special Rapporteur on Myanmar, Tom Andrews, insisted that arms sourced abroad had been used to attack civilians, alleging that China, Russia, and Serbia had supplied the military junta with weapons. Since generals took power last February, Mr. Andrews urged the Security Council to adopt a resolution to halt the trade. Stopping the junta's atrocity crimes begins with blocking their access to weapons, Mr. Andrews said in a statement, adding that the more the world delays, the more innocent people, including children, will die in Myanmar. The Bangkok Post reports that the government has agreed to relax entry requirements for overseas arrivals by replacing the second RT-PCR test with an antigen test and reducing health insurance coverage for foreign visitors from at least $50,000 to $20,000. These measures were agreed upon Wednesday at a meeting of the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration, or CCSA, chaired by Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. The revised entry rules come about a month after the February 1 resumption of the test and go entry scheme that was suspended in late December in a bid to curb the spread of the Omicron variant. Effective from March 1, the second RT-PCR test required by the test and go scheme on day 5 will be scrapped and replaced with ATK testing. The revised program will require only 1 night of SHA Extra Plus or alternative quarantine accommodation booking on the day of arrival instead of 2 nights. Foreign visitors who are required to have health insurance will need coverage of at least $20,000 instead of $50,000 under the revised program. The 2 other pre-travel requirements, proof of COVID-19 vaccination and negative RT-PCR test results no more than 72 hours before travel to Thailand, remain unchanged.
The Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez said possible disruption on the country's trade with Ukraine and Russia will be minimal amid the crisis between the two nations. Having it studied offhand has less direct impact given our small trade with Ukraine, only around $200 million according to Lopez, telling reporters in a Viber message. He also said that despite the crisis, nothing has changed in trade with Russia, which is 10 times larger than the country's trade with Ukraine. Lopez cited the top merchandise trade with Ukraine and Russia include wheat, oil, iron, and steel, electronics, and agricultural products. The tensions in the Ukraine-Russia borders have pushed higher global oil prices as these borders are channels for Russian oil trade to Europe. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. Eliana and I will be back right after this break.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang angking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Ngayong linggo, itigil muna ang mga gawaing bahay at manood ng Tara Game agad-agad kasama ang mga mahal nating Tara Gamers na kasambahay. So pag nakuha mo yung 100,000, anong unang-una mong gagawin?
Papagamot ko po yung tatay ko. Mayroon po akong pinapaaral ng mga anak. 3 po sila.
Isa kaya sa kanila ay maswerteng mag-uuwi ng 100,000 pesos? Alas 7 ng gabi, dito lang sa Net 25.
Nakikiusap po ako. Maawa ka po sa kanya! Hindi ako maawa! Bakit ba? Lahat na lang nasabihin namin ay kinukontra mo! Ako, si Contraman!
Mga kasama, ito ng mga dokumento. Kailangan nating lagdaan yan. Gamit ang ating mga dugo.
Kailangan mo talagang dugo? Dugo? Hindi pwede ka na lang.
Ang ating pong game ngayon ay pagalingan sa Tinikling!
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
Welcome back. Today, the UK Secretary of State for International Trade, the Honorable Anne-Marie Trevelyan MP, or Member of Parliament, paid a courtesy call to the Secretary General of ASEAN, Dato Lim Jock Hoi, at the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. The meeting exchanged views on the overall ASEAN-UK economic relations, in which two-way trade relationship reached over $31.8 billion in 2020. Both sides discussed areas of mutual interest, such as the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, or ACRF, sustainability and climate change, infrastructure development, digital innovation, and ASEAN centrality in the Indo-Pacific. The meeting looked forward to the implementation of the ASEAN-UK Joint Ministerial Declaration on Future Economic Cooperation, as agreed during the first ASEAN Economic Ministers UK consultation last year. Moreover, both sides exchanged views on the prospect of a joint study on how to further advance ASEAN-UK economic cooperation, including through a possible free trade agreement, comprehensive economic partnership. Secretary General Datu Lim expressed appreciation to UK's consistent efforts and contribution in supporting the realization of ASEAN community. He also underscored the importance of elevating ASEAN-UK economic partnership and improving trade and investment links between both sides.
Philippine food companies that participated in the Gulf Food 2022 in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, closed the 4-day expo with initial sales amounting to 23.6 million USD or around 1.2 billion pesos. In a statement Wednesday, the Center for International Trade Expositions and Missions said the value is expected to increase as local food firms had business-to-business matching activities at the Gulf Food 2022. According to CITEM, this is the country's 17th participation in the Gulf Food and the largest delegation so far. 48 Filipino food firms were part of the delegation, with 9 of them having physical presence during the 4-day expo and 39 showcased their products online. CITEM Executive Director Pauline Suaco Juan said that the Philippines is a great sourcing destination for food products because of its diverse agricultural landscapes and rich gastronomy. Especially with this pandemic, the demand for healthy and halal certified food products is high, and the country is poised to be a leader in this category. Gulf Food is one of the biggest food and hospitality industry expositions in the world, mostly participated by businesses that would like to strengthen their presence in the Middle East and Africa. She said, "Our promotion of Philippine food to UAE and other countries does not end with our participation in Gulf Food. We are continuously promoting our export products 24/7, anytime, anywhere through ifexconnect.com, our B2B or business-to-business platform for food exporters, and foodphilippines.com, our leads generation and promotion platform for Filipino food." Church of Christ members in the picturesque island nation of Maldives held a coastal cleanup drive. To tell us more, here's Steffi De Juan.
To help in maintaining the cleanliness of the beach here in Maldives, members of the Iglesia ni Cristo were gathered in Bilingili Island to reach this objective. Under the INC program and with the cooperation of FYM Foundation, volunteers from different areas of Maldives woke up early to go to Bilingili Island to conclude a coastal cleanup drive at Bilingili Island is just around 10 minutes away from the capital Male. This island is in the North Male Atoll and is administratively known as Bilibale and considered the 5th district of Male, Maldives. It lies about 2 kilometers west of Male Island and is reachable by a local ferry service that operates 24 hours between Male and Myanmar. And according to the volunteers, this coastal cleanup drive is very relevant nowadays to maintain the cleanliness as Maldives is starting to welcome more foreign visitors in the upcoming time. And indeed, this activity of members of the Iglesia ni Cristo help in campaigning environmental cleanliness.
Reporting from Maldives, this is Steffi De Juan, and we live in interesting times.
Thanks, Steph. And thank you, Eliana, for keeping me company today here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay safe.
Thank you, Alma. You stay safe too. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us here in ASEAN in Focus. I'm Eliana Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Eliana. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you back tomorrow. Same time, same place here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay in the news because we live in interesting times.
to Mobile Legends!
Ang morning show na always nagbibigay ng ngiti at saya sa bawat kada all over the world. Tara na't ma-inspire at ma-amaze sa kwento ng mga bawat kada na nagwagi sa anumang hamon at pagsubok ng buhay. Itago na mga remote control at tumambay lang dito sa paborito niyong barkada sa umaga, ang Kada Umaga! Dahil kayo ang bida dito.
Kahit sino.
Dito ka na naman.
Pwede na magkaroon ng million views.
Let's go. Sana parang hindi ka nalang tinry.
Kahit saan abutan, magti-TikTok yan.
Next, ang bagal.
Lahat ng steps, nakabisaduhin.
Hala, matabana, tapos naka-life vest pa.
Wow. Ito na ang math question na ang kailangan nyo sa pag-compute ay ears. Computers.
Saan mo kinuha yan?
Math kinig!
Sama ka? Hindi ako makakapunta eh.
Mahal din ang habit to. Daniel, Nakaball Videos!
To everyone that is working on the front lines as we battle this virus, thank you. Thank you for risking your health to make sure we are safe. You went to work for us, we'll stay home for you.
Thank you to those in the medical field, the shipping industry, sanitation and waste management workers, and other essential workers and first responders. You sacrificed your well-being for us, and for that, we are extremely grateful. You went to work for us. We will stay home for you.
To all the frontliners out there, we will never know how you're feeling as individuals as you risk your lives on a daily. But do know that we appreciate y'all's sacrifices. Let's hope and pray together that this pandemic will be over sooner than later so that we can all be back to normalcy. You went to work for us, we will stay home for you.
Hello, my name is Aaron Abin, and I'm a resident of Gaithersburg, Maryland. And this is just a quick greeting to all of the first responders out there who are helping out with this COVID-19 pandemic. So I know that a lot of you guys are spending lots of time away from your families, risking your own health, and spending lots of effort in order to assist those who are being affected by this pandemic. And I'd like to thank you for all this effort that you're putting in. And even though a lot of us are currently off work, or in my case, off school, you guys are still working hard. Thank you for going to work for us, and because of that, we'll stay home for you.
To all our frontliners in this pandemic, we would like to thank you all for your hard work. We know it's not easy, yet you show up every day to help save lives. Thank you all so much. You went to work for us, we will stay home for you.
Hi, I'm Jane Kathleen Gregorio from Corpus Christi, Texas. And to all of our first responders, whether you're there saving lives, or keeping the world running, or even just helping at the grocery checkout stand. In whatever capacity that you help, we appreciate